But I determined this within myself, that I would not come again to you in sorrow. For if I make you sorrowful, then who is he who makes me glad but the one who is made sorrowful by me? And I wrote this very thing to you, lest when I came I should have sorrow over those for whom I ought to have joy, having confidence in you all that my joy is the joy of you all. For out of much affliction and anguish of heart I wrote to you, with many tears, not that you should be grieved, but that you might know the love which I have so abundantly for you. But if anyone has caused grief, he has not grieved me, but all of you to some extent, not to be too severe. This punishment which was inflicted by the majority is sufficient for such a man. So that, on the contrary, you ought rather to forgive and comfort him, lest perhaps such a one be swallowed up with too much sorrow. Therefore, I urge you to reaffirm your love to him. For to this end I also wrote, that I might put you to the test, whether you are obedient in all things. Now, whom you forgive anything, I also forgive. For if indeed I have forgiven anything, I have forgiven that one for your sakes in the presence of Christ, lest Satan should take advantage of us, for we are not ignorant of his devices.
Last Sunday, I had a lesson that I would call an uplifting and encouraging sermon about it is well with my soul. Today is not an encouraging sermon, but it is nevertheless just as important in that if it is followed, it will make us be able to say it is well with my soul. And so today, rather sober subject, and that is, do not give Satan an advantage. Now, if you notice the last phrase that Joshua read, and then thank you for Josh for reading it, that's really what he said, and we'll talk about this a little bit later. He said, you do this what I've commanded you concerning this man to take his father's wife, so that or lest Satan could get an advantage of you. So my sermon is that Satan will take an advantage of us, and any situation, if we're not on guard. And so the key strategy in any battle is to understand your enemy. And so we need to know all we can about our enemy, and who is that enemy? He's the number one, and that's Satan, isn't he? He is walking about at this moment seeking whom he may devour. Whom resist steadfast in the faith is Peter's exhortation. So let's talk about this morning and how we can keep Satan from getting an advantage of us. Now, here are several terms in the Bible that relate to the same individual. Satan, or Satanas, you'd almost think it ought to be a little different, but that's the way it should be. Satanas, it means an adversary. Devil, we talked about this one, is denied. Diabolus, accuser, slanderer, one who plots against another, seeking to do harm. Beelzebub, particularly verse 23, emphasizes he's the prince of demons. He's a tempter, as we know, 1 Thessalonians 3:5. He's constantly tempting people to sin. He's called the god of this world, and we'll look at this a little more closely, that he blinds the eyes of people so they will not hear and understand and accept the gospel. So he is the god of this world, and that's a frightening phrase right there. He is the ruler of this world. He is the god of this world. The old serpent, obviously deceiving. The dragon, obviously I think he'd be talking about how powerful he is. An angel of light, again we'll talk about this a little later. But here's what's so scary. He can make himself appear like an angel of light. And then, of course, as we mentioned already, he's a roaring lion, walking about seeking whom he may devour. So we already know enough right now to say we ought to be on guard against this entity. Now, weapons that he has is basically one, even though they're more diverse than that. The one basic one is deceit. And he goes about constantly deceiving people. He's described as a serpent of old, called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. Revelation 12 and verse 9. Total deception. And so our goal is to see through those deceptions. Now he disguises himself, and if he did not, no one would ever follow Satan. So he must disguise himself, and here's the scary part of it. What do you see when you look at that? You can see a wolf in sheep's clothing, or you see a sheep in wolf's clothing. Or you see half sheep and half wolf. But you know, look, you get the idea, don't you? You look at him, he looks more like a sheep than he does a wolf. And in fact, probably correctly so, he looks just like a sheep. But underneath, it's really the devil. Now, you remember this verse in Matthew 7:15, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they're ravening wolves. Now, the question is, who's behind false prophets? The only answer is Satan is. Every false prophet is prompted by Satan. So, in essence, he is just like a lamb that looks like a lamb, but inside it's a wolf trying to devour us even here today. Now here's the one we alluded to a little bit ago, and I found this picture on the internet, and I think it pretty well tells the story, doesn't it? Your adversary, the devil, prowls about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Now, we all know if he looked like that, nobody would ever pay 1 ounce of attention. But he doesn't look like a lion. He looks like a sheep. He looks innocent. He looks holy. He looks appealing. And that's why we must be on guard against him. And so he disguises himself as, and here it is the third time, an angel of light. Now that's why I think that we must put out the alert. Satan looks like an angel of light. He can make himself look wonderful. But underneath, he is still the devil. And his goal is to take advantage of us. But do not give Satan an advantage. And that's the thrust of our lesson this morning. Just like that verse ended in 2 Corinthians 4. Do not give Satan an advantage. And we're going to be talking about how he does it. Now here's the verse again. In 2 Corinthians 2:11, lest Satan should take advantage of us, for we are not ignorant of his devices. But let's look at the verse a little more clearly to see what the background is. Remember back in 1 Corinthians 5, Paul wrote to Corinth about a man who had taken his father's wife. So it was a adulterous relationship, and the brethren were puffed up about it actually, and they were bothered that Paul would even condemn it. So he instructed them, you are to withdraw yourself from this person, so much so as to not even eat with him, so that he might be ashamed, that his soul might be saved. So he wrote that 1 Corinthians letter with those instructions, sent it to them. Now he's writing the second letter to them, and he's referring to the same incident. He said, wherefore I beseech you that you would confirm your love toward him. That's the man that's been withdrawn from. Why? Lest Satan should take advantage of us. That is, if we don't reaffirm our love for him, and we have the wrong attitude, Satan's going to take advantage of us. He says, remember, we're not ignorant of his devices. Now, other versions will have it phrased this way, lest Satan should take advantage of us. Another one, that no advantage may be gained over us by Satan, so that we would not be outwitted by Satan, so that no advantage would be taken of us by Satan. So he will take advantage of us. Now, how does he work? And this is where it becomes practical. Remember that he's going to work on your heart. He's going to work on your mind. And this is what's scary about it. Remember Acts 5, verse 3? That ring a bell to anybody? Look at this verse. Peter said, Ananias, you remember Ananias and Sapphira have tried to deceive God, the Holy Spirit. Ananias, why has Satan filled your heart? Now that's scary. Why did she act like she did? Why did they try to pretend that they gave everything they'd gotten from the sale of the property? The answer is simply this, that Satan entered their heart and their mind and filled it. And then they operated just as Satan wanted them to do. Now here's the thing to be aware of. If he can get in their mind and cause them to do wrong, don't we know that he can get in our mind and cause us to do wrong? In fact, I would dare say that every action is preceded first by the mind. That's what he operates on. Well, let's look at another. John 13:2. Jesus and the disciples eating together at supper, and supper being ended, the devil having already put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him. What made Simon do it? Because the devil had put it in his heart to do it. And I say it one more time. If he could do it to Judas, then don't you and I know that the devil can put those things in our hearts as well? Be on guard. He also uses things that appear to be good to make you think that is right. Something is good. Now, 2 Corinthians 11, beginning verse 13. Back to the part about Christ, devil being transformed into an angel. Now, here the verse is just before. For such are false apostles. Who is a false apostle? It's a person who came among them saying, I'm an apostle. But how do you know he's right or not? Paul said, I'm an apostle. So how do you know the difference between the two? Such are false apostles. What? They're deceitful workers. They're transformed themselves into apostles of Christ. That is, they're pretending to be apostles of Christ. Well, he follows up by saying, and no wonder, for Satan himself transforms himself into an angel of light. Therefore, it is no great thing if his ministers. Now look at there. Who are the ministers? It is the people that are claiming to be apostles, but he said they really are ministers or servants of Satan. Ministers or servants of Satan. And they transform themselves into ministers or servants of righteousness, whose end will be according to their works. Paul met the elders of Ephesus over the little town of Miletus. They didn't have time to go by there, so he said, I want to meet you. So they met him over at this little area of Miletus. And among the things he said to him in Acts 20, here's a really telling verse. He said, know this, that after my departing shall grievous wolves enter in among you, not sparing the flock. I wonder how many wolves came into there in Ephesus. How big was the pack, you suppose? How big was those wolves? They didn't look like wolves, did they? They weren't in the form of wolves, but they were wolves. And they didn't spare the flock. Now the flock is the church there. And he says, I know when I leave that these grievous wolves, these false teachers that come to you in sheep's clothing, they're coming to devour, but you won't know it. They look innocent and beautiful and good. And not only that, he says, look, even among yourselves shall men arise speaking perverse things to draw away disciples after deception. So, I wish that the devil would appear the way he's supposed to. When I was a little kid, my brothers and sisters had dressed up like the devil, the best they knew how. And it scared me to death. I wish he'd hear that, don't you? Would anybody be around and follow something that looked like that? No. But he might appear, folks, like a well-dressed denominational preacher, carrying the Bible. Or he might be wearing a clerical robe. He's not become the way he really is. You know these smooth-talking denominational preachers on television? If they're not teaching truth, let's be realistic. Some teaching fine to teach error. And there's no other basis but the devil. You ever thought about that? And yet they are wonderful and so holy with the clerical robes on and that smooth talking, preaching, and carrying that Bible and holding that Bible. But Paul says they're going to come among you, but they're really nothing but wolves. Be on guard. And so what he uses is devices. 2 Corinthians 11. 2 Corinthians 2, verse 11. Again, the same verse. Lest Satan should take advantage of us, for we're not ignorant of his devices. Devices mean schemes, or tricks, or plans, have an evil design. And again, notice here the plural. Paul used the plural, devices, not just one device, but a plurality of them. He's going to use a lot of devices. So let's talk about some things that Satan's going to do to try to reach persons. He's going to blind our eyes, our minds. Now think about this. He's going to try to blind your mind and not accept the truth. Again, look at 2 Corinthians 4:4. The God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelievers. For what reason? To keep them from seeing the light of the gospel of glory, who is the image of God. Now that's frightening. But the devil is able to blind the minds of people so they will not see the truth and be saved. Not only that, he snatches away the word once it enters the heart. And you think you know what I'm alluding to here. With the parable of the sower, you know that which fell by the wayside, the seed? He says, Jesus said, explain it to him, those by the wayside are the ones who hear. They heard the word. But then the devil came and takes away the word out of their hearts, lest they should believe and be saved. Now, how frightening can that get people? Here are your minds that heard the word. It would have had receptivity and produced fruit. But Satan comes in, and he's able to snatch that word out, and thereby he reclaims them. They're going to still be his. Folks, we're not dealing with a non-important entity. We're dealing with a powerful entity. And he's right here with us, no doubt, this morning. Not only that, he tries to get us hooked on the things of the world. And he's very successful. Regarding this device, of course, I'm talking about 1 John 2, 15 through 17. Notice these three ways. He uses the lust of the flesh, immorality. He uses the lust of the eyes, materialism, things we see and we want. And he uses the pride of life, arrogance. And as far as I know, every temptation will come through one of these three avenues. Either through a fleshly impulse that makes us want to do something immoral or wrong, or the eyes will see something it wants and it's so bent on it, it will get it. And regardless of what God thinks. Or filled with arrogance and pride and lifted up and think we're so much better